Welcome to Life, Love, and Therapy. I am Jumi Olawale. This show is about learning tips, advice, and ideas about how to improve our lives and relationships from the viewpoint of a therapist. Welcome, Andrea Sager, to Life, Love, and Therapy. I'm so happy to have you here to share your story. But before we start, I would like you to introduce yourself to the people that listen to Life, Love, and Therapy. Can you please tell us what you do, Andrea?
Hey, yes. So I am an intellectual property attorney. I really focus on trademarks and protecting brands. So that's basically what I do.
Wow, that sounds like fun. That
It
sounds so much
is.
like fun. How long have you been practicing law?
So I've been practicing law since 2017, so I'm still a baby lawyer, but I've been on my own for just over a year, and I've loved every minute of it. I have quickly become pretty much the go-to brand protection attorney for entrepreneurs. And through that, I'm able to really educate and help other brands realize, first of all, what they need protected and why they should protect their brand and how to get it done.
We have Andrea on today to talk to us about miscarriage and how to deal with that experience. So, this is such a touchy subject that is very sensitive, and a lot of people don't like to talk about it. So, Andrea, I'm going to hand off to you because I've never experienced a miscarriage before, but I do have friends that have experienced miscarriage. Can you tell us your story?
Absolutely. I had a miscarriage back in 2017. I had my son in February of 2017, and then we got pregnant when he was about 6 months old. And we had actually already had our first ultrasound confirm the heartbeat. And at that point, for those that have been pregnant, typically after the first ultrasound, your chances of a healthy pregnancy are very high. It's not as common to have a miscarriage once you've already had the original ultrasounds. We had no idea, didn't have any indication of a miscarriage. We had actually gone to Mexico on vacation, and we got back like on a Saturday or Sunday, and that Monday we had our second doctor's appointment when I was supposed to be 12 weeks pregnant, and they basically told us there was no heartbeat, and that was just the most crushing thing that you could ever hear. And I'm not going to say I know that it's harder than when you actually know that you're having a miscarriage, because I just don't know. But for us, it was really hard just because we had absolutely no idea. Our first pregnancy was as smooth as can be, no issues whatsoever. And then we go in for our second appointment thinking it's just a regular routine checkup, just checking the heartbeat, making sure everything's fine, good to go. So we were in the exam room, and they just do the Doppler for the heartbeat, and She couldn't find a heartbeat. And I didn't think anything of it because she was like, oh, let's go to the ultrasound room. I think the baby might be hiding behind your scar. Oh, because I had a C-section with my first. And we were just like, okay, yeah, let's go to the ultrasound room. So I was kind of excited. I was like, oh, yay, we'll get to see the baby again. Seriously, at that point, I was just like, still just completely naive to what was going on. And at that point, when she turned on the ultrasound, like there's different colors that you can detect, look for blood on the ultrasound, and the doctor just said, there's no heartbeat and there's also no blood flow. Wow. So thankfully my husband was with me, and I immediately I just screamed. I was like, no. And I remember my husband afterwards, he told me that he didn't realize what happened. In his head, he was like, okay, so what's the next test? Because they couldn't find the heartbeat and there was no blood. It didn't click that we had lost the baby. Oh. He thought, there was another test that we had to do or something. But then he was like, then your reaction, then he knew what happened. And it was just absolutely the hardest thing we had ever gone through. Because we had the miscarriage. So I never bled. I never had any pain, absolutely nothing. So that's why it was just such a shock, because we just thought we were going in for a routine appointment. And then we find out that there's no baby. And one of the hardest things for me was the fact that we actually lost the baby about 3 weeks prior to that appointment. So,
No
I mean,
way.
yeah, so they guess like the gestational age of the baby whenever they confirm the miscarriage. And yeah, it was about 3 weeks. So in my head, I was just like, I have been walking around for 3 weeks thinking that I was growing this child inside of me, and I wasn't. And that
Hmm.
was really tough. And then I remember the doctor basically giving us the options to get rid of the baby. I mean, I don't
Hmm.
know any
Yeah.
other term. So she explained the pill situation. You basically take the pill and then go home, and hopefully everything passes on its own. And in my head, I'm just like, I don't want to wait. I want to be done with
Yeah.
this as soon as possible. So luckily, she was able to get me in for a D&C the next day. I remember they gave me the anesthesia, and I just remember kind of like freaking out, like why does this have to happen to us? Like, it was very, very hard. It was a very tough
Yeah.
time.
I can't imagine being in that room, getting a DNC, and it's just starting to dawn on you like, wow, this is really happening.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I think at that point, when it happened, the shock was there, and it was just like, okay, like this sucks. I can't believe this is happening. And then like the rest of the day, it was just like I was more calm the rest of the day. And I was actually living in Cincinnati, and all of my family was in Texas. I mean, I have the best parents and best friend ever. My best friend also lived in Texas, and my best friend and my parents, all three of them, flew up that night to Cincinnati to be with us.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Yeah, that made me feel a lot better, just to know that we were loved, and just had people that would drop absolutely everything that they had going on in their life to be there for us. So I was more calm the rest of the day. And then I think finally, when they were like rolling me back to go into the procedure room, it just kind of hit me again. Like, why did this happen to us?
Wow, I can't even imagine. You had lost the baby like for 3 weeks and you
Yep.
didn't even know there were no signs or anything. Did they tell you a reason why you miscarried? Was there any reason given to you?
No, I'm one of those people who think I know everything happens for a reason, and I like to know the reason behind it. So, of course, I'm just sitting there and looking up everything on Google, because, of course, the doctor's just like, oh, it's just something that happens. It's nothing you did. But, of
Right.
course, like, I was carrying the baby. So in my head, it was just like I had to do something. I was racking my brain. Like, it sat with me for a long time, just trying to pinpoint the one thing that I did. I mean, I never found anything. In my head, I was just like, oh, it could have been this, it could have been this. But at the end of the day, it really can just be something that just happens.
Right. I've been doing my research on this, and 1 in 4 pregnancies will end up in a miscarriage, and 50% of women that have a miscarriage will never find out what happened. Like,
Yeah.
it's just completely random.
Yeah, and that's really hard for somebody like me who likes to know the reasoning behind everything. So, I mean, I racked my brain for months and months afterwards. It's just something that happens.
Yes, it is. And a lot of women tend to blame themselves too, because they feel like that's their baby. They're the ones carrying it and they're the ones
Exactly.
responsible for it.
Yeah, yeah.
You found out that you had miscarried 3 weeks ago. You went back the next day, had the DNC. How did you feel? What emotions were you experiencing after this loss?
You ask how I feel, but really it was more of just being emotionless. I'm an attorney. I graduated from law school in May, and this was September, and I had a job at a big law firm, and the miscarriage happened 2 weeks before I was supposed to start at that law firm. So I was kind of just preparing to get started at work, and I was hoping that, working there would keep me busy and keep my mind off of it, but it really didn't. And it's a weird feeling, because just feeling emotionless because you don't feel anything. I think it's just also that depression mode that you're in, because you just don't feel anything.
It's like apathy.
Yeah, like there's nothing to feel. You're not happy, you're not excited, but you're also not just like sad about anything. You just don't
Mm-hmm.
feel anything.
Mm. You're not feeling anything because, I mean, you just had this massive loss. How were you able to go to work?
I had actually let my boss know. I told her, I was like, hey, by the way, I'm pregnant. She's like, oh, no problem. And then I had to email her and basically tell her I'm no longer pregnant. And she was very understanding. She's like, I'm so sorry. But I honestly wasn't able to work. I mean, I went to work. It was very hard. And I think the miscarriage actually kind of spiraled a really tough time in our lives for me and my husband. We both just spent probably about 7 months just really being depressed and not being in a good place. We finally realized that we weren't happy. I wasn't happy at work. He wasn't happy doing what he was doing. And I think we both kind of had this unspoken silence among us. Like, we didn't really talk about the miscarriage. Like, we would talk about how much we missed it, how we wish things would be different, but we would never really talk about how it was a tough time because of the miscarriage. Does that make sense?
Yes, yes, yes.
I mean, it was a deafening silence. So that happened in September. In April, we finally both were just like, we are not happy here. And where we were around the Cincinnati, Ohio area, we didn't have family around us. So finally we were just like, okay, we know we're not happy. I mean, we had our son still. I mean, that was probably the best part of our life at that point, but we just weren't happy. So we decided to pick up and move across the country to Texas and Houston to be close to my family. So we did that just over a year ago, and that was the best decision we could have ever made. And for us, it's crazy, but I mean, it honestly just took us moving across the country and essentially starting over in order to recover from all of that.
Yeah, it looks like the miscarriage sort of touched other things. Like, it wasn't just about the loss. It also allowed you to, even though you didn't talk about it, to look at other things in your life that wasn't working. For example, where you were working, the area, the need for family and stuff like that.
Yeah, exactly. The closest family we had was 2 hours away, and we wanted to be close to family. We wanted our son to be able to be closer to family, just not just us. And we honestly just had to start over. We both just had an awful 7 months. And finally, we recognized it and we spoke about it to each other. And it's also made us stronger in a way. Like, it's made us communicate better, really express how we feel. We have talked about the miscarriage openly to other people and between each other, because I also had a little bit of postpartum depression. So my husband knew that he had to keep asking me, like, hey, are you feeling okay? So he's always been very, very helpful in that realm. And after the miscarriage, every so often he would ask me, are you okay? Do we need to do this? Do we need to do that? And, I'd always say, yeah, I'm fine. It sucks. And he tried to do a really good job of trying to tell me not to blame myself, but still, like, there's nothing that anybody can tell you to make you not blame yourself. It's just something that you go through.
Yeah. In talking to your husband afterwards, how did he deal with the loss? Did he tell you how he coped with it, or did he talk to friends about it?
He's a songwriter. He doesn't make money by writing songs, but he writes a song for everything that has ever happened in his life. And so he coped by writing a song. I think that's how he really coped with it, was just songwriting. And my goodness, I don't even like to hear the song because we both just end up drowning in our own tears.
Oh.
Yeah, he definitely has a way with words. And the song that he wrote it was beautiful, but also I can't hear it without crying my eyes out.
Yeah. What did you do in terms of rituals to mark the loss? It sounds like your husband created his own ritual through music and writing. What did you do after you lost the baby to mark the loss, or maybe even when the pregnancy was supposed to be due?
So after the miscarriage, that's when I really began to understand, first of all, why other women blame themselves. Second of all, I started to understand why people don't talk about it.
Mm.
But I don't like the fact that people don't talk about it because it's a taboo subject, but it needs to be talked about because I think talking about it is what will make women feel better about themselves when that
Yes.
happens. So I have always been very open. I talked about my miscarriage on Facebook. When the baby was due, I wrote about it on Facebook. And then on the anniversary that we lost the baby, I always make a point to address it and be open about it. I know it has touched other people too, because I've received messages from other female Facebook friends that have said, thanks for talking about it. It's hard to go through, and it's hard to not blame yourself. It's hard to talk about it.
Yeah.
And so they really appreciated the fact that I'm open about it and open to talking about it. I have to be careful sometimes, even in like in-person conversations. It used to be really hard to talk about, and I would cry every single time I would talk about it. But now I'm very open, and I talk about it just in regular conversation like it's no big deal. I think I catch some people off guard about it, and they want to, take pity. But I'm just like, it's not something I want pity for. It's just something that I want to be able to talk about without people kind of like cringing and not wanting to hear about it. Having a pregnancy, like that's something people openly talk about. I had a miscarriage. That's something that needs to be openly talked about. That way women don't feel ashamed when it happens.
Yes, and you sharing your experience and your story was given permission to other women that had the same experience to also share their story.
Exactly, yes.
I want to ask you about whether this loss impacted your faith, if you're a person of faith, or your philosophy about life.
This is a great question because I have recently been studying more about the law of attraction, manifestation, and I'm still struggling with it because I'm studying it in a way to understand it more. I've been a Christian. My family raised me as Catholic, although we didn't really attend church that often. But in recent years, I've really been studying different modes of spirituality just because I want to understand other people's perspective.
Yeah.
Because I was raised one way. Now that I'm an adult, I've come to realize that may not be how it is. And I just want to study different modes of spirituality. That way I can come to my own conclusion on, what I actually believe in, not what my parents believe in or what my best friend believes in. Does that make sense?
That makes a lot of sense. Yes.
And nothing against anybody who believes in anything. But for me personally, the one thing that I have never been a fan of is religion. So there's Christianity and then there's religion. I don't want to go too much into this, but growing up and seeing different religions and how they differ, in my head, I've always just been like, why are there different religions? Like, as a whole, we pretty much believe in the same thing, but then there may be this little thing or that little thing. Like, why can't we just... I don't want to go too deep there, but
I hear you.
Yeah, because of that, I've always wanted to attend a non-denomination church. And I honestly haven't even been to church in a couple of years, only because I am still like doing the studying of what do I actually believe in. I study it on my own. I don't feel the need to go to church. Maybe that's not being a good Christian. It's what works for me. But whether the miscarriage actually like questioned my faith in certain things, no, it didn't. I've always been a believer that everything happens for a reason. So I spent a lot of time questioning that. Like, what is the reason behind it? I mean, at this point, I've just come to believe, like, I just wasn't ready for it. I wasn't ready for a second baby at that time. And that's probably the reason why it happened. Like, it was the universe telling me that you're just not ready. You weren't ready at that point.
Wow. You've done your work, it sounds like.
Well, I really struggled for a long time. Why did this happen? Why did this happen to us? And that's really what I can boil it down to is the universe was telling me you just aren't ready for it yet. I do have a 2-month-old now. So I have the boy who's 2 years old, and now I have a little girl who is 3 months old.
Aww.
So we've done a good job of recovering. Obviously, we still wish we would have had the other one as well. I mean, we're doing a lot better now. We've recovered for the most part. I'm definitely not glad that we had a miscarriage, but I'm happy for the fact that we were able to experience something so detrimental that still brought us closer together and really helped us experience life in a different way together.
Yeah. All I was saying to myself in my mind was like, you've done your work, because for many women, or even the men too, that have to go through this with their partners, they have to do their work and they have to come to their own conclusion about creating a narrative or a story around what happened, right? So for one person, it might be different. For another, it might be something else. And hearing you say that for you, you were able to get to a place where you said, well, maybe I wasn't ready for it, just makes me say, well, you've done your work. And and it's also interesting that you said that for the most part, you guys have worked through it. And I like that word, for the most part, because when it comes to issues around grieving, it's not a linear thing, right? 1 minute you're okay, and then something might remind you of whatever it is, and you might feel a little bit sad about that. You might feel a little bit, you might have other emotions around it.
Yeah, absolutely. For the first year, I mean, I couldn't think about it without getting teary-eyed and crying. So if this interview would have happened a year ago, I mean, I'd be bawling my eyes out right now. Like, I wouldn't even have been able to say half the stuff I've said here. I mean, I've coped with it, and I come to realize that it just wasn't our time.
Yeah. What would you say to another woman who is going through this right now, or who has gone through a miscarriage and is really struggling with it? From one woman that has experienced it to another, what would you say to your sister out there?
I would say let it out. Whatever you got to do, just let all your emotions out. If you're emotionless, that is completely fine. But if you need to cry, cry it out. If you need to talk about it, talk about whatever you need to talk about with somebody, like whatever you need to do, like whatever you're feeling in that moment. Like, I just need to cry right now. I just need to talk to somebody right now. Just let it out and do whatever needs to be done. Because I think a lot of women, they're afraid of what people may think of their reaction. And who cares? Like, you need to take care of you, and whatever you're feeling at that moment needs to be done. Just do it.
I love it. So you're saying that validate all emotions, whatever emotions come up or lack of emotion that comes up, it's okay.
Yeah, because the quicker that you get out what you're feeling, the quicker you'll be able to not move on, because you will never move on from it. It will always be a part of you. But the quicker that you personally will feel better about it.
I know that so many women are going to find this to be extremely useful. Before you go, is there one thing that you would say to a woman that has experienced miscarriage at some point about what not to do?
Don't blame yourself, and don't blame your partner, especially if they don't know how to cope or how to help you. Because at the same time, you are the one who carried the child, but they're also dealing with loss as well.
That is so good. I think we don't talk enough about how partners also experience loss with miscarriages, because they figure it out in their own way, like your husband did with his music and writing.
Right. So my husband, we're kind of on different spectrums when it comes to emotions. He is definitely more expressive with his emotions, and I am not. I tend to bottle things up more, but I have learned that emotions need to be let out. And because of him having more emotion, that made me realize, like, he's dealing with this too. Like, I'm the one who carried the baby, yeah, but I mean, it's his child too, and he's the one who's going through the loss as well.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for giving voice to that. I really appreciate you coming on today and sharing your experience with us and blessing so many women. Thank you so much.
It was my pleasure.
Any information that other people can look at so that they can get to know more about what you do and who you are?
Yeah, you can follow me on social media. I'm Facebook, Instagram at Andrea Sager Law. If anybody has any questions, or if you just need to vent to somebody about whatever it may be, if you want to just talk to somebody about your miscarriage, feel free to just message me on there. I am more than happy to talk to anybody about it.
That is it for this episode. Thank you for joining. If you're looking for ways to help this show, please leave a nice review and recommend this podcast to your friends. Also, don't forget to like me on Facebook at Jumi Olawale Therapy and Counseling and follow me on Instagram at Jumi Olawale the Therapist. If you have any topics that you would like me to cover on this podcast, please reach out to me via Facebook or Instagram. And you can also send me an email to jumiolawale@gmail.com. This is your host, Jumi Olawale. Thank you for listening and see you next time.